Most people think that the next war is going to be about AI or semiconductors or maybe even ideology. They're wrong. War is increasingly about shipping lanes. You just don't realize it yet. That quote from Nury Vittachi is probably the most important thing you'll hear this year. Because of this new multipolar world, the front lines are not battlefields. They're trade routes. And the real weapons, ports, terminals, islands, and choke points. Today, I want to walk you through the 4 geographies that are quietly shaping global trade and power in 2025 and beyond. Panama, Diego Garcia, Greenland, and Taiwan. None of them are the center of the world, but all of them are gatekeepers of the world's flow of goods. This is the cold trade era. Let's break it down. Let's start with Panama. You might have seen the headline earlier. CK Hutchison, a Hong Kong conglomerate, sold a major chunk, or was going to sell a major chunk, of its global port operations terminals in Panama, Mexico, and the Middle East to BlackRock. Now, this isn't about shipping margins or shareholder returns. This is about control. For years, CK Hutchison, backed by Chinese capital, was quietly expanding its reach over global logistics nodes. In a world dominated by the US-China rivalry, this was starting to draw attention. So what did they do? They tried to sell to BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, and in many ways, a proxy for Western institutional capital. This wasn't just a divestment. This was a strategic retreat and a handover of influence. Because owning port terminals isn't about profit. It's about presence. You control cargo. You see who's moving what. You shape the rules of engagement. And in a cold trade world, that's power. Next stop, Diego Garcia. It's an island in the middle of nowhere, literally the British Indian Ocean Territory. No economy, no exports. But it might be the most important U.S. military base outside the continental U.S. Why is that? Because it sits smack in the middle of the shipping superhighway, the corridor between the Suez Canal, the Strait of Hormuz, and the Strait of Malacca. And right now, with the Houthis attacking Red Sea shipping, vessels are skipping the Suez and rerouting around Africa through the Indian Ocean. That makes Diego Garcia central again. It doesn't generate trade, it protects it. It's the invisible enforcer of maritime order in a part of the world that's increasingly unstable. The world's arteries are shifting, and Diego Garcia is quietly guarding the blood flow. Now let's go north, way north. Let's talk about Greenland. You might remember that obviously now Donald Trump is trying to buy Greenland. Everyone's laughing. But geopolitically, he's early. As climate change melts the Arctic, the northern sea route is opening up. Ships can now move from Europe to Asia via Russia's Arctic coast, cutting transit time and skipping traditional choke points like Suez and Malacca. And what sits along that emerging polar corridor? Greenland. It's not about oil. It's not even about ice. It's about control. Greenland gives access to early warning systems, submarine surveillance, Arctic refueling infrastructure. If you think about it this way, it's the Diego Garcia of the Arctic. We're witnessing the birth of a new trade route, and Greenland is the high ground. Not for today, but for the next 50 years. In a multipolar world, the future is climate shaped, and Greenland is a front row seat. Now, the most sensitive of them all, Taiwan. Everybody knows Taiwan because of TSMC, the world's most important semiconductor company. But what most people miss is that Taiwan is also a maritime keystone. It sits directly on the Asia to US shipping lane, the single busiest trade route in the world, according to the World Economic Forum. It flanks the Taiwan Strait, which is not only a geopolitical hotspot, it's a logistics artery. To the south is the Bashi Channel, a narrow, deep-water gap that's crucial for both US and Chinese submarines and naval movements. Now, if Taiwan were to be blockaded or invaded, it wouldn't just disrupt ships. It would paralyze the entire Pacific trade ecosystem. Taiwan is the cork in China's maritime bottle. It's also the plug for Japan, Korea, the Philippines, and Southeast Asia. And this is why Taiwan matters. Not just because it makes chips, but because it controls how those chips and everything else move. Now let's zoom out. You have Panama, the play for port ownership and choke point access. Diego Garcia, the deep state sentinel guarding maritime routes. Greenland, the high ground of the future polar passage. And Taiwan, the keystone of the East Asian trade and naval balance. This is the real story of globalization in a multipolar age. It's not about free trade anymore. It's not about openness. It's about strategic access. Trade has become a battlefield. Silent, slow-moving, but high stakes. The weapons are ports, leases, terminals, and shipping insurance. The frontline soldiers, asset managers, diplomats, naval logistics officers. This is not the Cold War. This is cold trade. A world where control over flow means control over outcomes. Where the winner isn't the one with the most tanks, but the one who controls the container ports. If you've been paying attention to military buildups, trade tensions, and diplomatic posturing, but haven't factored in shipping lanes, you're missing the point. Because this is how war happens now. Quiet, technical, financial, and completely about control of the map. In the end, it comes down to this. In a multipolar world, whoever controls the lanes controls the game. And right now, the game is just getting started.